Товарища Сталина.
So, tavarish, that means comrade in Russian. So, tavarish, rебята. My name is Matthew, and you're watching the third Russian lesson. So, today we're going to talk about gлаголи. We're going to be talking about Russian verbs, basic conjugations, and we're going to use real-life examples to learn verbs. I have to learn through, actually using it. I'm not just, a sit-down and read a textbook type of guy. So we are going to be learning Russian verbs and cases, well, not really cases, but Russian verbs and aspects through a Stalin speech. So I have not listened to the speech. It does have subtitles on it. And basically, I'm going to try to, whenever I find a verb, I'm going to see how it's conjugated. Basically, the actual conjugation form, is it reflexive, what tense is it in, what aspect is it in, and we're going to kind of analyze and learn that way. So a really cool website, if you're watching this video, I strongly recommend that you check out is russianlessons.net. And the reason I like this site is if you're struggling with something, or let's say, for example, once we get into the case system, which can sometimes get a little bit complex, I can just go to case, and it'll basically just give me all the general rules real quick. One thing to note before I get into this video, though, I did kind of touch on going into plural nouns a little bit in the last video. Not necessarily because I wanted to, but I kind of had to. So I did forget about neuter nouns. So if you have a neuter noun and you need to conjugate it to the plural, it's not e or u. It is a or ya. It kind of takes on a feminine ending. So for example, if you have Moria, let's change my keyboard over here. Moria, to do multiple C's, because that's just one single C. Moria. So just something to keep in mind. Pretty easy rule. I think Russian plurals are pretty simple. But anyway, we are getting into verbs now. So it has this really nice list of conjugations here. And first thing, we're just going to learn standard verb conjugations. Like I said, the entire purpose of this series is it's just crap you need to know. So when you're reading Russian, or you want to say, I speak Russian, it's я говорю, it's not я говорит, because you have to conjugate the verb. If you've ever learned a Romance language, like a Spanish or something, it's basically the same weird chart thing. I don't think language is math, and I don't think it should be learned like math. So after I go over the very bare bones basic rules for most, not all, there's always exceptions, but for most Russian verbs, we are going to jump into a Stalin speech and see how many of these you can find in the wild. Now, when you're doing your SRS, your Anki cards, which you should be doing every day if you're actually serious about learning Russian, then once we get past verbs, and I'll probably have another basic video, maybe on adverbs, and then probably do one video where I just try to shove in as many things as I can about the case system on there. Again, I linked this, I think, in my last video, the chart for the case system. I haven't got into the spelling rule yet, but basically after that you should be able to do this on your own and use full sentences in your SRS. I think right now I'm strongly advising just to use singular words till you get up to a few hundred. After a few weeks of this, we should be able to jump straight into sentences, and then after that, I would say after a couple months of that, I would honestly recommend going straight into the monolingual transition, and then just doing straight up Russian to Russian. If you have an Anki card, the definition for that card should also be in Russian. For example, выступление, which should mean a performance. Here we go. I should be able to just put that in here, and yeah, the beginning of a march, the movement of troops, basically, is what this definition says. But you should know enough of the language, and if there's words in the definition that you don't know, you should be able to copy and paste them into your Anki deck. Anyway, I made a full video on this. I'm not going to get more into it. Basically, verbs. So what are we going to talk about? Basic verbs. So if you really want to, if you're first getting into Russian, it wouldn't hurt to have a list of the 100 most used words, for example, just so you can learn them. I'm going to go with the verb говорить because it means to speak. So right now we have говорить, which I just spelled wrong, говорить. Again, if you've been watching through my series, you should know how to say this. Like I said, we do not use the English alphabet. We use the Russian alphabet. We're learning Russian. I'm not learning Russian with the English alphabet. It makes things more difficult. We're not doing that. So говорить. So we have я, which, by the way, I guess we're going to have to learn Russian pronouns now. I haven't got into that yet, but я is I, right? So I is just one letter, and Russian is the same way. This is ya. Ya is I. We have мы, which is we. Okay. We have ты, which is you. We have on, or you could go она. I'm trying to Ana would be another one. Or we could also go ano, I guess, would be another one. We're just going to stick with on for now. On means he, so ana, if we wanted to go that route, ana, that would be she. We'll just do he or she. So on, ana, I guess we could also do it would be ano. So it's kind of tricky with these, but since I'm just doing blitzkrieg real quick, what do these mean? He, she, this would be basically the same version of that, but for neuter. Now, if you have a noun, for example, that you are describing, so let's say I am describing the noun Schkaf, which means like a cupboard or something. To describe that, I would say he. The Schkaf is he. I wouldn't say it. In English, we would say it. Well, we have gender in Russian. It would be, you would call it he. So, for example, if you're translating something, sometimes translations get mixed up if you're using Google Translate or something, or the Переводчик, because these translations, it has 3 different genders. Now, the true it, which would be ano, like if you're talking about it, like we're going over to it, but it is the C, well, C, I've already went through that noun a million times. There's Moria with an E at the end, or a yeah, I should say. That would be ano. So if we're talking about I'm going over to it happens to be C, that would be ano. But if I'm saying I'm going over to it, and it is gorod, which means like city, then I would say on for it. Or let's say I'm going over to it, and it would be, let's say, Moskva, which is how you say Moscow in Russian. Well, it ends with an a, that is a feminine, or I could say Russia, I'm going over to it. It happens to be Russia, then I would say Anna. Anyway, for now it doesn't matter. Once we get into past tense, it will, but we'll get to that towards the end of the video. So then we have vui, which would be you, like plural. So if I understand, if I'm trying to remember Spanish right, that's like usted kind of, versus tu. So this is you plural. It's also formal. So for example, if I'm talking to a professor, I'm going to say vui. If I'm talking to my friend, I'm going to say tu. So it's something you don't necessarily need to know exactly right now. Once you do your immersion, you're going to understand this a lot more. But this is like formal tu, and it's also plural tu. So just keep that in mind. And then last but not least is ani, which is like plural. So ani is multiple. It's basically these, but plural. Like I said in Russian, there's no gender for plural. It's just plural. So how do I say gavri when I'm using all these 6 different types? So ya, I, yas, I. Yeah, by the way, I would add all of these need to be in your SRS. You will remember them, I think, after a while fairly easily just because you're going to use them so often. I would not make separate ones for these, though. Just do like on or something. You should be able to tell by the ending what gender that is for. So, ya gavriu, ya gavriu, muy gavarim, gavarim. By the way, I haven't done these in such a long time, but it doesn't matter because through my immersion, I see verb conjugation so often. It's just become like easy for me to point out. So, ti gavarish. Let's just stick with on right now. On gavarit. Just eat. So, differences, and I think I might have pointed this out on my last video. The miyaki znak, so if you see a t with the letter T basically, with miyaki znak afterwards, the soft sign, if you see these two, chances are it's probably a verb. So the difference between gavarit and gavarit, these are both the exact same, the way you pronounce it. This is just like the normal form, so this means to speak. So if you see a verb like this, and when you do your verbs in Anki, you want to use just the normal unconjugated form right here. But when you conjugate it, you drop the miyaki znak off, it's still pronounced the exact same. So on gavarit and gavarit, you just have to know with your context which one's which. Obviously, when you're reading it, it's pretty easy to point out. So we gavaritya, we gavaritya. Okay. Ani, this one's a little wacky. Gavaryat. Ani gavaryat. So these would be the 6. Now there's really 2 big forms right now. So there's the eat and then there's at. So I'll do at real quick. And basically you just need to know the endings of these. So if you're struggling with this, again, if you go to the Wiktionary, the Wiki Slovar, I've already linked this in my last video, basically ru.wiktionary.org. You should have this bookmark. Heck, it wouldn't even be a bad idea to have this as your homepage right now. So let me put говорить, and let's say I'm like struggling with this verb, or I don't really know what to use. Again, if I go here, so this is настоящее время, which basically means that this is the current tense, this would be past tense, and this is like the command, if you're commanding somebody like speak now, that'd be говорить or говорите. Again, we'll get to that later. So я говорю, ты говоришь. Again, I haven't even looked at this in a long time. This is just because through immersion, you're just going to know this stuff. That's why I say very often don't focus on grammar. It will come through immersion, which is true. So, and again, они говорят. Okay, so that's all of our conjugations here. And again, this seems like a lot. Take it piece by piece. Again, if you're struggling with this, you're going to pick this up through immersion eventually. And again, the wiki Slovar is a fantastic resource. So next verb we're going to do, which I find to be a very simple one, is читать. So читать means to read. So like I said, there's eat and there's at. This is at. So this is probably even a little more common than eat. I just stuck with говорить first just because a lot of the phrases that you're going to learn when you're first going to learn Russian, like я не говорю по-русски, я только чуть-чуть говорю по-русски, like говорить is used a lot. You know, мы не говорим по-русски, мы, you know, совершенно говорим по-русски. Like you need to know that stuff, and you shouldn't have to think about it. It should just be automatic. You know, when you're conjugating in English, like he goes to the store, I go to the store. You don't think about it. It's just instantaneous. So we need to do the exact same thing with Russian. So anyway, я, and again, я is usually one of the easier ones in my mind. Я читаю. Pretty simple. Мы читаем. Читаем. So we read. Ты читаешь. Excuse me. Читаешь. That would be the next one. Он читает. Читает. And then that's going to be a big difference between говорит and читать, though, is the on right here. It's not on говорит, no, it's on читает. So that's what we add to the ending there. And then we have вы читаете, читаете. And then они читают, читают. So again, I'm going to double check this. Like I said, I know it's going to be right though, just because I use these every single day, and bam, there we go. So these are the standard. Again, there's weird endings. Some verbs like glitch, for example, which means like to lay, has some really weird conjugations for that, and you can see that here, just because it's not like in the standard form as these are. Those are the two for говорить and читать. Basically, I would remember those conjugations. Those are the two conjugation types you're going to use like 90% of the time. So I would remember those. Again, this is just normal present tense. So in Russian, there's two different verb types. There's perfective and there's imperfective. These would be imperfective. So basically what that means is an imperfective verb is something, it might be ongoing. It happens more than once. Perfective is like it's a one-time thing. It only happens one time. Big difference, though, is perfective is usually in the future tense, where imperfective is usually in the present tense. So this is basic. There is one more type, and again, I will go here and I will just cover it real quick. It's called reflexive verbs, and I spoke about this a little bit in the last video. But reflective verbs, if you see anything that ends with an S-ya, so like одеваться, that'd be a good one. And this is why I love this website, RussianLessons.net. It tells you the examples pretty, clearly here. Like одевать means to dress, одеваться means to dress yourself, right? So it's something that you do yourself, basically. That is kind of what a reflexive form is for. If you want to know more about this, I would strongly recommend that you check out this website here. Basically, long story short, the conjugation for these are slightly different. And to give an example of that, I will go here and I will copy and paste this into the Wiki Slovar, and it should pop up in its normal form. So let me go here, paste that in. I guess it does not. All right, одеваться. All right, now let's look at the conjugations here. So basically, if it doesn't have that T in there, then you drop the ya in the conjugation. So я одеваюсь instead of одеваются, you get rid of the T. If it ends in a vowel, you drop the T. So that's the big difference with these. Other than that, they're sort of the same. We is slightly different, so you can see that right here. Adivayetyas. That is slightly different, but other than that, that's kind of the big, you still have the same basic premise here. So again, yutsya, again, as you have yut right here, and then you would have, because this ends with u and it doesn't end with yut, as ani would, you get rid of the t in there. It's just an s with a miyaki znak. So that's the big difference between reflexive verbs. That's kind of a little bit more, I don't want to say in intermediate Russian, but we're just kind of focused on basic verbs right now. But if you see these, that's a very short summary synopsis of what they are. And you will see them a bit. Some verbs are pretty much almost completely reflexive. So anyway, we're going to get into past tense now real quick, and then we're going to get into future tense, and then we're going to jump right in and see if Comrade Stalin can help us with any of this. So chitat, so let's say I want to do it past tense. So instead of I read, I guess I read past tense. English is stupid, isn't it? It's the same for either tense. It might be a bad, let's go gavarit. Let's go gavarit instead. Instead of I spoke, we can, let's just go gavarit. That might be a better one to do. Gavarit. Or actually, I take that back. I'm going to have to edit this out. All right, so chitat. So how do I do past tense? So this is I read, but I want to do I read past tense, like I already read. So how do I do that? Well, Russian, the past tense is way easier than the just normal current tense, and I don't know why. So basically, I would add an L to the end of it. So for some odd reason, past tense is related to gender. Now, this is a good thing in my mind because there's only 3 of these that we need to remember, and they're pretty universal across all Russian verbs. So chita, so we had chitat, and now I'm just dropping the end here. So the only difference between all of these is how many people are involved and what gender are they. So like, let's say I was a woman, then ya chitala. Let's say I'm a man, ya chital, right? Okay. So me is multiple people. That is plural, chitali. All right, see a pattern here? Okay, that's one person. Let's just use masculine from now, chital. On, okay, it would be chital. Let's say it is she. So instead of on, let's say it's Anna. Okay, well, chitala. So again, I strongly recommend this website if you're struggling with any of this, and it will kind of give you basically the rules for this. This is just like adjectives almost. Like look at the endings here. So like let's say it was ano. Well, guess what? Chitalo. We, chitali. So we could either be chital or chitali. So basically we, because like I said, it can be one person or it can be multiple people. So when you say we towards one person, it is a very formal way. Like I'm talking to a professor, I'm talking to my boss, extremely formal. If I'm like talking to my brother, I'm going to say the. I'm not going to say we, I'm going to say the. Now, if I'm talking to a group of people, so let's say I'm a professor, I am talking to like 100 different students. I would say we. So when I address you guys, I should be saying we, not the, because there's multiple. It's kind of like you all. So think like country, American. We is basically you all. It is also formal. It's really confusing. I don't know why they do things that way, but anyway, that is we. Ani chitali. All right. So again, that is multiple people. Chitali. And if that was going to change, like if I was going to go Anna, which I already did this example, but that is the difference. So basically, you kind of have to match the sign to the ending. This is just for past tense, by the way. So she read, past tense. They read, past tense. I think past tense is way easier. And by the way, if you see something that ends with an L, not all the time, but there is especially if there's like a vowel right before it, there is a large probability that it is probably a past tense verb. It's one of the reasons I like Russian. Probably the only thing about Russian grammar that I actually enjoy is the fact I can read a Russian sentence. I might not even know a single word in that sentence, but I know what every single part of speech is just by the way that it ends, which is probably the only nice thing about Russian. So that is pretty much it for past tense. Now, what do you do with future tense? Oh my gosh, future tense. Oh, well, Russian has this weird thing that I already touched on a little bit called imperfective and perfective. It's the aspect. So basically, long story short, without going off in this super long thing, you would have 2 verbs that basically mean the same thing. So let's say, for example, I have rabotat. So this might sound similar. This is actually where the word robot comes from. Работать is Russian for to work. Работать. And if I wanted to say to work, like in the future, like I will work, поработать. So for most verbs, you can get away with pa. Some of them are completely different. So for example, говорить here and сказать, imperfective, perfective, the verbs are completely different. So you need to know two verbs for one verb, which is extremely complicated, but welcome to Russian. There's a reason it is like 3 times more complicated than Spanish, according to a lot of different resources. So, жить, прожить, любит, полюбит. So for the most part, you're just going to be adding pa. There's a couple of odd weird balls here where you don't. To say to move, or like to go somewhere, and I'm not going to get into that in this lesson because there's like a million different ways of saying it, but there is an imperfective, there's perfective, and there's also a whether you're going there or not, or how you're traveling. So there's like 10 different ways to say I go in Russian, which is extremely complicated. And the reason a lot of that's complicated is because it's either imperfective or perfective. So if I wanted to say that I will go to this, I will work, for example, like tomorrow I will work, then instead of saying работать, I would say поработаю. So поработаю. I will work, okay? Or if I'm saying I'm working today, or I'm working, again, imperfective, like let's say I'm just working continuously, or I work at the factory, I would say работаю. If it's a one-time thing, then I would use the perfective form. So this is sort of complicated, and a lot of native English speakers will struggle with this. By the way, if you screw one of these up in Russian, like native speakers aren't gonna, oh, you used the wrong, form, blah, 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 blah. They're still gonna understand what you're trying to say. You can use these in past tense, by the way. So let's say I wanted to use perfective, like I worked for one day, perfective, not continuously. Then I would go, я поработал. You can still use these in past tense. So it can be past tense, it can be future tense, it's just not present tense. And if you look at that here, будущий, which basically means future, this would be the past tense. And this is the command form. So I guess since we're at it, I will get to that real quick, and that'll probably be the last thing I cover before we actually try to figure these out in real life by using a Stalin speech as an example. So let's say I wanted to say work harder, work harder. So let's say we go back to работать, which means to work. And let's say I was like screaming at employees, you need to work harder. So the command form, which is what you see right here, повелить. And if you notice for all the verbs that we have went through, that повелить is been here on the right. Get back out of here. And basically what that means is that is like a screaming at somebody. I shouldn't say screaming at somebody, but it's like a command form. So let's say I wanted to say get back to work, like work. Like I'm screaming at somebody, you need to work. So if I say работай, that is telling one singular person you need to work, right? Ты поработай, or you could just say работай. Now let's say it is multiple people's, and I would say работайте. So I would add to that. So I'm not going to get into these too much. Again, this is more getting an intermediate Russian. I just want to know enough where you guys can figure out how to read this stuff and understand what it means. But if you see something like this with an ending like this and you're trying to figure out what the heck it goes to, because again, this does not match anything on the chart here for either past or future, then it is probably a command form. So работай, работайте. If we go back to говорить, that would be another good example. Would be говорить, говори or говорите, which is the exact same as the conjugation for вы. So if we go to говорить, again, this повелить is basically like an order or a command. So говори по-русски сейчас, like speak Russian now. That means I'd be talking to one person. If I said, говорите по-русски сейчас, it would mean like I'm speaking to multiple people. So, and also, I guess the last one, go through читать, just because it has that at ending. Let's go through читать real quick. Okay, again, command form, читай сейчас, like speak, read now, or читайте. So I guess for читать, it would be slightly different than the eat ending. I said читаете, it would be читате. Anyway, I'm not going to go through crazy like these. I'm not going to, I would not necessarily advise you do exercises, or language is not math. You're going to pick this up through immersion. It's just something you need to be aware about. If you are struggling, again, with a specific word or a specific glagol, a specific verb, I should say, go to the Wiki Slovar. It'll have the chart of all the conjugations here. On top of that, I would also recommend going to Russian lessons if you're struggling with a specific, for example, let's say you did not understand reflexive verbs, then you could go through here and get a quick little lesson and just figure that out real quick. So anyway, on to Мы продолжаем Stalin speech. Let's see how many of these verbs we can pick out, and let's see if we can figure out how it's conjugated. By the way, Stalin was a creepy mass murder fanatic. I do not support any of what he did at all, really. He was a garbage human being. This is more just because this is a historical record, and I feel like if we don't know about the past, we will not know about the future. So just PSA real quick, I do not support Stalin at all. If anything, it is quite the opposite. The guy was a murdering fanatic. But anyway, continue. Okay, so this is kind of back to our last lessons a little bit, but if we look at some of these here, we can see that this is conjugated actually to the genitive case right here. We have not gotten into that yet, but you can kind of tell that these are nouns and adjectives. Onto this page here. Okay, perfect. I have not seen this speech, by the way, so this is really good. We got a lot of verbs here. Okay. Внимание, слушайте. Okay, so basically we have attention, listen, but this is listen like command form. So слушать means to listen. Говорит Москва, like Moscow is speaking. So basically слушаете, here we go here. And by the way, this is how I learn Russian. I don't like going through textbooks or anything. I like actual real resources that, are somewhat entertaining or I can understand something from. I just feel like it's way more authentic and better to use these than going out of a textbook. So this is the first verb that we have. So I can tell by the ending here. It's the same ending that читать had. Слушайте. So basically this is a command, but this is a plural command. So he's speaking to multiple people. So hey, you plural, listen, right? So that is the first one. And then right after that we have говорит. But see how it doesn't have that miyaki snack? So it's not saying to speak Moscow. Moskva's Moscow, by the way. It's saying говорит without the miyaki snack. So Moscow is speaking. Present tense, Moscow speaks. That's basically what that says. So simple говорит, and again, command form. This is a perfect first sentence to begin with.
Москва. Говорит Москва.
Repeats it. Говорит Москва. Moscow speaks.
Работает.
Oh, perfect. These are verbs we all went through. This is actually the perfect video. Работают, весело. Okay, so basically say they work. They. So ют, that работают. So работают. So we can see here at the bottom, работают, весело. So they are all working. Everyone is working. Работают. It ends with ют. It's not работать. It's not работают. Работают. Don't get a 5 out of 5 on these Zapadny Shpion lists, especially when you're watching to a Stalin speech. So again, Russian verb conjugations are not too difficult. You just need to practice them a crap ton. Again, we'll get into the genitive case later, but Sovietskого Soyuza would be, this is genitive masculine case. We will get to that in a later video. Again, he is repeating, so this is perfect for trying to learn something, just the way that he keeps on repeating the same verbs. Слушайте выступление. So слушайте, that's another, again, same thing we just covered. That is a command form for multiple people. Слушать. No verbs with this one. So товарищ, that means comrade in Russian. So товарищи. Again, that's probably a word you want to know, but again, Comrade Stalin is basically what it says. Big stereotype, by the way. But they do use this word a lot in Russian. You probably should know it.
Граждане, братья и сестры, бойцы нашей армии и флота.
Dude, the audio quality is terrible, by the way, but it is from 1941, so. Okay, обращаюсь. So this is reflexive. This is what I was talking to you about. So обращаюсь я. So basically, к вам обращаюсь я. The reason it's обращаюсь and обращаюсь я, you get rid of the T because it ends with U. So this is I speak. Now, another weird thing about Russian that I haven't covered yet is, you know how if you look at the conjugation here, it says to you basically address обращаюсь я. In Russian's very flexible with the way you can say things. So, for example, I can say I speak, я говорю, or I can say говорю я, speak I. Either way in Russian, it's acceptable. So, I guess kind of get that through your head as you can kind of mix things around in a Russian sentence. It's very confusing if you're a native English speaker, but basically this is saying like to you I address. So, обращаюсь я, he could also say к вам я обращаюсь. It doesn't matter in Russian, you could say it either way. I read I, it doesn't matter. We read we. In Russian, you can go either way. So, just FYI. My friends. Give me some verbs, come on. Verbs. Okay, продолжайте. This is perfect. So, продолжайте. This is a reflexive verb. So, продолжать means to continue. But he used продолжайте. So, the difference, again, like, it's kind of, the reflexive kind of goes off себя, which means, like, on myself. So, basically, this is saying, like, continuing instead of just saying to continue, basically. So, it's продолжайте. Again, it ends with T. It doesn't end with a vowel, so we continue to use the ya, where last time we did not use ya.
Несмотря на героические сопротивления Красной Армии, несмотря на то, что лучшие дивизии врага и лучшие части его авиации уже разбиты и нашли себе могилу.
Okay, so this is a really weird. So найти means to find. И нашли себе могилу, like to find themselves a grave is basically what this says. They find themselves a grave. So нашли, let me get into that real quick. And like I said, this is how I learn Russian. Is I'll watch something like this and I would just geek out on every single word. In my mind, that is the best way to do it. So if I go to нашли, again, the cool thing about Yandex, if I have a word like this and I don't understand what it is, if I go to нашли right now. Okay, this is the normal standard form to find найти, but basically the way the conjugation is with this, with the shli, and the same thing with like shol, which means to like go, past tense. If I look at the conjugations here, because this is not like a standard Russian verb, it doesn't end with miakiznak like most of them do, but this is a verb, and if you look at the past tense here, there's a pattern here, right? Again, I didn't cover this in the lesson. Like I said, this like the lesson kind of covers like 90% of Russian verbs. This is the other 10%. But if you look at these a few times, you can kind of figure out yourself and kind of fill in the gaps. So there's always exceptions, just like in English, there's always exceptions. But at least this is kind of a standard one. So, for example, if I wanted to go with like shol, idti, again, look at like the difference between these. This is like to go, basically. This means to go. Yeah, idu, yeah, shol. So I go, and then this is past tense. I went. And if you look at the difference between the conjugations, they're pretty wacky. But the cool thing about this is at least this is somewhat consistent through a few different verb types. And найти is one of them. So anyway, let's get back to the speech. Okay, so we have продолжай, what was that, продолжайте, we had the reflexive verb. Now we just have the standard conjugated. So the enemy continues is what this says. Враг продолжает. But this is not reflexive. So that is something you're going to need to know the difference of. We've already had multiple reflexive verbs so far in this video, a lot more than I would have expected. And then the verb after, лезет, this is basically unconjugated. This, I think, лезет means to lay, I want to say. Let's find that out real quick. Лезет. To climb. Okay, I was a bit off on that. I apologize. To climb. So the enemy continues to climb forward. And this is, so it means to climb. So because it's unconjugated and has that miakiznak, it's the infinitive form, I think, which just means to. So to climb instead of just climb, because it's unconjugated. Okay, so succeeded to capture Litva is Lithuania in Russian. I don't know why, but Sahabatit, I think, again, that means to capture. And again, this is to capture. Udalas, this basically udalos, again, reflexive form here. So we have a reflexive verb here, and then we have to capture, basically, savatit is what this is. But this is unconjugated. So because it has that miyaki's neck, basically, in the T before it, that basically means it's to, then the verb, instead of just the verb.
Значительную часть владли, западную часть было.
Now, if you see some of these weird endings to basically some of these adjectives and nouns, it's because these all are in the case system, which we have not gotten into yet. So I might do 1 or 2 more videos on the case system before I just kind of get into what I want to do with this channel and this series, which is basically doing things like this, where I kind of pick apart speeches and we basically learn Russian through, like Putin, Stalin, like actual Russian resources, instead of like the garbage that you're going to be reading in a textbook that's really boring and not interesting at all. But anyway, long story short, these are cases. So this would be Belarus, but now it's Belarusi because it's it's conjugated.
Часть западной Украины.
A part of Western Ukraine.
Фашистская авиация расчленяет.
Okay, so this is another Rashirayet, again, conjugation. I might not even know, I want to say this means expand. I might not even know what this verb is. I can tell it's a verb, and I can tell it's conjugated towards either an ana, or an ano, due to the ending.
Военные действия своих бомбардировщиков, подвергая бомбардировкам Мурманск, Польшу, Могилев, Смоленск, Киев, Одесса.
By the way, I do not know how you'd understand this without subtitles, by the way. The quality, granted, I know it's 1941, it's still garbage.
Севастополь. Над нашей Родиной нависла.
Okay, perfect. I did not want to end the video until we had at least one past tense verb. I know this is a past tense verb. Let's say I don't even know what this verb is. I can tell it's a past tense verb by the ending. It's an L with an A afterwards. So I could easily, if I did not know this word, let's say I saw it multiple times, I wanted to know what it meant. What I could do is I could go here, I could type in the word, navisla. Okay, so navitsnut, so looming, but this is looming past tense. So it was looming, and it is a feminine noun. So I could say Russia was looming, because Россия ends with ya, which is feminine. It doesn't have to mean she. It just means that the noun that it is describing or the pronoun is feminine. Basically, that's what that means. So perfect. We had at least one past tense verb.
Серьезная опасность. Как могло случиться?
Sluchitsia, so it means like happening, to happen to yourself. It is in the reflexive form. Like что случится, like what's going on, what's happening. Again, mog means like can. That would be past tense in the neuter form right there, mogla. So again, a couple past tense verbs here.
Что наша славная Красная Армия сдала.
Stala, so let's look up stala. Again, that is another, it's perfect that we're having all these past tense verbs right now. Zdala, so zdat, like to pass. Zdala means it's past tense, but it is singular feminine, which means like she passed, or like Russia has passed, past tense. Romania, so Germany would also be feminine technically, has passed. A lot of countries in Russian are, you can just tell by the ending. But basically, yes, it's L ending with an A. So one more,
Фашистским войскам.
and then we'll go from there.
Ряд наших городов и районов.
Dude, seeing all these cases and not trying to explain them is kind of torture for me for right now. There's a ton of genitive case in here.
Неужели немецко-фашистские войска в самом деле являются?
Okay, so this is perfect. So the samandeli is kind of like a saying, which means like really. And butchering that right now, but this is like they are appearing, but this is in the reflexive form. So again, if I was struggling with this, I know this is a verb because at the ending right here. And we've seen a lot of reflexive verbs of the speech. I guess Stalin liked reflexive verbs. I don't know, maybe that should be the title of this video, learning reflexive verbs with Comrade Stalin. But if I'm having trouble with this word, again, if I was using YouTube, I could just copy and paste this, but unfortunately I am not using YouTube, and I had difficulties finding a speech that actually had subtitles for you guys, so I didn't really have that option. But this means to be, I've always thought more of like to appear.
Является.
Okay, so basically that's what this is, but it's in the reflexive form. And again, it's still going to have the ya. It's not going to end with this because it ends with yut. Now, if it ended with you, then you would get rid of that. That's how you would spell it. But because it ends with a constant and not a vowel, it's yut. You know, so you would add the t. Well, you would add the ya at the end there compared to just having a miyaki snak like this. So that is the big difference between reflexive conjugations. Again, if you're still struggling with that, I would strongly recommend the Russian lessons website that I talked about earlier. Okay, trubyat. Okay, so again, exercise trubyat. So it ends with yat. So what conjugation is that? That is ani, that is they, that is plural. So again, if I'm struggling with that, trubyat. Again, I might not even know what the verb is, which I do know what it is, but I can see this is the normal form here. And if I even wanted to go a step further, I could get out of here. I could go into the Wiki Slovar, and I could look it up and be, oh, trubyat, ani trubyat. So you don't even really need to say ani, technically. In Russian, they do use pronouns. I know in Spanish, they like drop them off. Instead of saying yo hablo, you say hablo. Russian goes kind of both ways. So this is basically saying that they trumpet, but they never put ani in there. But anyway, long story short, in my mind, that is the best way to learn Russian grammar is through actually seeing it in real life. Once you just know the basics and enough of it, if you watch enough stuff, not necessarily like this, but just enough like actual Russian material, it'll start clicking with you. You'll see it over and over again. And then you're not doing these weird math chart equations thinking, oh, I speak, but oh wait, I gotta conjugate this and this perfective and this imperfective, and blah, 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 blah. No, if you watch enough, again, have enough immersion, it should just come like that, and that is the entire purpose of this video. So anyway, that is pretty much it. That is Comrade Stalin, that is Comrade Stalin, basically teaching us Russian verbs and Russian conjugations. Again, all of his verbs are pretty much right on. And the cool thing, the only cool thing I could probably say, again, Stalin was a genocidal maniac. But anyway, cool thing is that this was not even Stalin's native language. His native language was Georgian, so he had to learn Russian. This is not his native language, yet he obviously was able to get the verb conjugations down without difficulty. They're really not too difficult in my mind. It's definitely a little more strange than what we are accustomed to. But anyway, that's the end of the video. До свидания. Thank you for watching, and do skorovo.